Sentire Media.
Welcome to the Stop Italian Sounding podcast, uncovering authentic Italian food. I'm your host, Robert Campana, and join me as we delve into the rich heritage of genuine Italian food, exploring its legends, history, and traditions. Through important tips and insightful interviews with industry professionals, you'll gain a deeper understanding of authentic Italian food. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stop Italian Sounding show, uncovering authentic Italian food. So, today's guest is someone who brings Italian heritage to life, not only through, let's just say, a plate of pasta or delicious food, but through movement. Anna Harsh is an award-winning choreographer, author, and artistic director of Allegro Dance Company, which she founded out of deep love for her Italian-American roots. With a master's of communication, a bachelor's in dance, and certifications in Pilates and yoga, Anna's work blends scholarship, artistry, and wellness. Through Allegro, she has dedicated her career to preserving traditional Italian dances, traveling across Italy and the United States to research and archive moments to tell powerful stories of family, history, and community. So there's a lot in common with dance and Italian food. She's the author of 3 books, including La Danza, The Italian Dance Quest, and Alessia Discovers a Spider Web, and hosts her own podcast, The Dance Floor, which I was honored to participate in a few months ago. Today, we're exploring how dance, like food, is a language of culture and how both could preserve the spirit of Italianità or Italianness across generations. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because the last time her and I spoke, there was more in common between food and dance than I have ever even thought. So, Anna, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to talk about food and dance. I know I enjoy both, obviously, and traveling through Italy, what an experience and an adventure always.
Oh, it always is. And you're always learning something new because Italy is a nation of a very strong cultural identity, not just through food, but through many different aspects. And dance 100% is one of them. So could you take a minute or two and just explain, who you are, how you got to the point that you are right now? I know you're doing a lot of great things. So tell us.
Yeah, my research, like you, kind of came out of a college project. I was a dance major at Slippery Rock University and was researching for my final production or my final college thesis project. And I thought, I'm going to do Italian folk dance and thought this would be a no brainer. All 4 of my grandparents are from Calabria. So I thought, oh, well, certainly someone, has some information in my family, in which we did. And I always danced, since I could walk. I mean, that was just culturally what we did after dinner. You take a passeggiata, right? You take a little walk, you talk about your hopes and dreams. And then music and dance were a part of our dinner time, so that was not new for me. But when it came to details, what dances, what are the steps, what are the names of the dances, and where specifically did they come from, that was another beast. So my research sort of led me to Italy, straight to Italy. And I studied with so many teachers over the last 32 years. It's been incredible. And I wanted to have the information preserved for the next generation because when I was in college, there weren't any books about Italian folk dance specifically on a shelf that I could pull off and read about or read somebody's journey about. And so I changed that recently and wrote 2 books myself about my research, and so that somebody in the future can pull it off the shelf and discover what it means to do certain dances and why they came about and where they're from specifically. So that's how my company sort of started, and we've performed all over the United States and Italy, and even for Pope John Paul II in the year
Wow.
2000. It was actually a jubilee year,
Could you
so
tell
we
us
had
about
to.
that? That sounds
Yeah.
like a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's
It
wow.
was. That was incredible, and my hometown priest actually helped me pull that off. He got us tickets because I didn't think that that would be possible at all. He got us tickets to an open, air mass, and, my company traveled all the way over there to perform, and we were touring Italy, not only as tourists, but, also as performers. So we danced in several cities, and we got to Rome and got to the Vatican and checked in and had a bit of our costume on, and they said, okay, he's going to be coming over towards you, do your dance, and he'll bless you in 2 languages. And I said, "Oh my god. Oh my god," "What is happening?" So, it was one of those things that I had on my vision board as a 6th grader, I wanted to go to Italy and dance and maybe meet the Pope, one of those things that's just crazy dreams, right? Well, all of those things came true on my vision board, and so I talk about that in my book, but meeting, up close with him was really, spiritual to say the least, but incredible. He had a very incredible energy about him and blessed us and clapped along while we danced. It was just crazy.
I'm getting chills just listening to this because I could only imagine being there, being told he's going to walk up and bless you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how did you perform after? Like, how did you like, you must
Yeah,
have
I
been
think
really
we all just
focused
kinda
and
just
zoned in.
yeah. We were in dance mode for sure
Right,
and just did what our bodies sort of took over, and thank goodness for muscle memory,
right. Well,
because your brain was
maybe his blessing helped.
yeah, I think so, and as I started studying these dances, I thought, "Well, isn't that an ironic twist?" Because many of the tarantellas are about healing, and they are prayerful, and so I thought, "This is a full circle moment. Here we are dancing at the Vatican,"
Right.
It's
Yeah, that
crazy.
really is. Yeah. Wow. The compliments, complimenti. That's awesome. And you just said, I know we spoke about this last time when I was a guest on your show. You said many of the tarantellas, plural.
Yes.
I was always under the belief that la tarantella like is the tarantella, but then there's a tarantella napoletana. Because my family is from Molise, so we tend to follow more of the Neapolitan, let's just say, tradition. So when I think of
Okay.
tarantella, I automatically think of tarantella napoletana.
Right.
But then there's tarantella calabrese. So tell me, like, how many
Yeah,
tarantelle are there? And then we'll see if there's a bridge from the tarantella maybe to like the regional identity, and then maybe to food. I want to see if we could connect these dots. That would be
sure.
interesting.
Well, you can kind of take that tour, and I'm sure food will direct you through these regions as well. From the Campania region all the way down to Sicily and Sardinia, they all have a variation of a tarantella. So the songs are gonna be completely different, and the themes of their tarantella, that's why I talk about my first book. It could be a conflict, they could be talking about passion, it could be about healing, the bite of the spider. That's where
Hmm.
we get tarantella in the first place,
Right.
that it was a tarantism that, they would shake and spin and maybe roll on the ground and try to shake off the poison and dance it out.
Hmm.
And people would crowd around them. And now this dance is 2,000 years old, so it's not a contemporary dance.
Right. Right. No, not by any stretch of the
Not being
imagination.
so I'm sure the food, in those regions are just as ancient. Think about pre-Roman days, what did they eat?
Right, exactly. Yes, yes. And then the evolution of food. I mean, you mentioned Calabria before. I think you said you're Calabrese origin.
Yeah,
And the first thing I think of when I think of Calabria is spice and duja or peperoncino, spicy things, and
yeah,
like making you want to jump. And I'm trying to
yes,
see if there is a way that we could connect that to the
yeah.
tarantella. So the tarantella calabrese, for example, what is that? What
What does
does
that look
that
like?
look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, usually, like in my little section of Calabria where my family is from, they usually start with two men. Two men would show off, and like you said, it's very spicy. So it has their high kicking legs, and their hands would clap underneath their legs, and they're showing off these big jumps. And maybe like you would saute something out of a pan that
Right.
jumps.
Right.
Saltarello, to
Yeah.
to jump. And so they have these jumps and high kicks, while the women is quite the opposite. They have these little shuffling footsteps that look like they're just glowing or just floating on top of the Ionian Sea, and they will float around him, and one gentleman will go out of the center of the circle and get another lady and dance with her and maybe bring it into the other gentleman that's dancing with him. So it's a circle. And then there might be a couple in the center. When that couple is done, they step out and another couple. So there's like 4 or 5 moves, let's say. They have a vocabulary of moves. They don't have names because it's too old to name what the step is. But, they have a few moves. It's improvisational, it's spicy,
Right.
it's
Spicy,
wild.
just like it's food, and just like the character of the typical Calabrese, a spicy person, and I know they're very proud of that, as they should be. What about the tarantella napoletana?
Yeah, so Naples has a dance called tamariata, which has 7 variations. And in the tamariata, which means dance of the drum, as I come to understand, it has castanets that we use or nacre. They look like little chestnuts and they are clicked together, dance of the drum. And it's very giving honor and praise to the ground, for the crops, the food that we eat. And so again, thousands of years old. So they would pray, to different gods to give them thanks for the crops, sowing the seeds, give thanks for the rain and the sun that comes down and feeds their crops and harvest.
Thanking the land, and it seems like things haven't really changed because I know they all Italians are really thanking land because Italy really produces a lot of good things, and it's interesting how these different mentalities are manifested in different activities. Dance, of course, being one of them. Um, so tarantella calabrese, tarantella napoletana. What if we? So we're kind of heading north over here. You said tarantella is more of a southern Italian dance. Now we get to the Lazio region, the Roman. There is no tarantella romana, or am I?
Right. Right. It's more of a saltarello. Yeah, we get a saltarello, which has a little bit of a beat to it. It's a little upbeat, but the posture in the upper body starts to change a little and it becomes more upright. So maybe we aren't clapping underneath our legs anymore, or maybe we're not swirling and swirling and twirling, and sending our prayers up to the heavens, but we might be doing a little bit of footwork and, dancing face to face with a partner, not necessarily in a circle, but we can. So the shapes of the dance sort of change from a circle moment to lines or diagonals or even like a square, sort of like a square dance, like mazurkas and waltzes and things. And you might change a partner. So you don't have the same partner, you might change a partner.
So how because I want to say regional is are these traditional dances? Because when I think of Italian food could be so regional, but not just regional. We could zone in even on the specific city or comune. Is that similar with dancing? Because as we're going from Calabria all the way up to Napoli, then to Rome, the
Right.
dances you're explaining, traditionally speaking, are different. But then can we
Yeah,
zoom in even more and say, well, this
sure.
area was like this, or maybe this borrowed from this area, similar to that of cuisine?
Yeah, they might have different arm positions, or one person might do a different kind of turn, more than others. And I know even in Calabria, like it can change from town to town, just that minute thing. And you're like, oh, I know where you're from because you're doing this move. So I'm
Interesting.
sure the food is the same way. You have that border around,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
maybe yeah,
And
the
mine's
cheese
always better
is
than
different.
yours, is what they
Yeah.
say. My dish is always better. Yours is good, by the way. you know, very Very interesting. So we go from the spiciness of Calabria, then we go to Napoli, we go to Rome, working our way up a little bit in terms of cuisine. Things start to
Yeah.
change, obviously,
Things start to drastically change,
especially when you get to northern Italy with cuisine, but
especially.
also dances. Because I don't know much about dance, but when I think of the North, I think of its influence from Austria, let's just say, and then I think automatically the waltz. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. You'll have a waltz, and there's a beautiful dance we're in the Veneto region, I believe. It's called La Furlana, and it's a waltz, 3/4 timing, dance about just, courting one another. So it's about how you meet one another, the 2 people meet in the center doing a waltz step, and, they might do a little box step of the waltz. She might turn in and out. She offers her scarf that is attached to her skirt to his hand, so they never touch. They only are connected through the scarf. So it's a beautiful, beautiful dance.
Very prim and proper is what
Yes.
it's not as spicy as a calabrese.
No, it's nowhere near any tarantella I've ever seen. So it's quite the opposite, and the feeling is different. It's very lighthearted and, like you said, prim and proper, and the posture is very upright, shoulders back and looking at the person directly in the eye, which is always a folk dance, yes. You always wanna look at your partner in the eye. It's one of the life lessons that I talk about when I teach the dances because looking at someone when you dance with them is, the polite thing to do. And of course, the Southern tarantellas, they reach out both hands to say, I'm going to pull you in. whereas the waltzes and things, it's like, no, no, this is the person I'm dancing with. And, you have a curtsy or a bow always in the North. So that might be the same with food. There may be one aspect that it's like, oh, we always have this in the North.
Yeah, no, but when it comes to food, I'm just thinking about like the concept of smaller portions, the concept of an aperitivo or, stuzzichini,
Yeah,
finger food, I guess you could say,
right.
whereas
Smaller
there's more of
portions
an
for sure.
an abundance in the South.
Yes.
It's more, I don't want to say warm, but I mean, I guess we could use that word. Whereas in the North, it's more prim and proper, similar to what we're saying. And if food is anything like dance, Italians are very protective of their food. You do it like this, and if you do it a different way, you have to call it something else. So my question, so is it similar in dance? Like, how do you respect tradition while innovating at the same time? Can you innovate with dance? I guess you
You
can.
can. Yeah, you can. It evolves. And what we do is, let's say we're doing a tarantella on a stage, for a festival. Well, we don't want to close a circle. Then the audience can't see inside of what's happening inside of our little party.
Right, right.
So we kind of make it Greek-esque and open to a semicircle so that the audience completes our circle. So they feel a part of the circle and they can also see the footwork and the beautiful moments that are happening inside of that tarantella circle. And maybe they do feel a little bit of that healing energy and get some of the energy that the dancers are creating on stage. So we do innovate that way. There is a moment, where we have to say, well, this is a little bit more entertainment than I'm in a field authentically, I've
Hmm.
been bitten by a spider. Well,
Right.
no, but we can reincarnate this idea of being healed, celebrating community. These weren't wedding dances. A lot of people misunderstand that tarantella is a wedding dance. It was never, ever a wedding dance. It was always about healing or, giving praise and honor. So they do it for processions to the church sometimes to give honor and praise to a certain saint day or whatever. But it was never a wedding dance. But that doesn't mean that today we can't celebrate our heritage at a
Right.
wedding.
Because that's part of celebrating the celebrations that are important. Very interesting. So, yeah, no, very, very cool. So, I mean, you mentioned a key word, community, when it
Mhm.
comes to traditional dancing, and community is also an element that food revolves around as well. Especially in
Right.
Italy, you're always, gathering at the table, whether it's friends or family, preparing things, friends or family, and everybody's part of it. So I think that's a main thing that food and traditional dancing share. So what is the current status of traditional dancing in Italy right now? Because
It
I know,
still exists. Yeah,
so
we're
is it
still doing it.
still doing it, still going strong?
Still going strong, and in fact, my teachers are so, innovative in ways that they can get through to the next generation to keep it going because,
Good.
like I said, these dances are thousands of years old, and so when I teach a class, I always say, "Is now the time you wanna drop the ball? Like, is this the generation that says, 'You know what? It's not important anymore, let it go.'"
After all that time, I mean, you haven't dropped the ball
Right,
for thousands of years, so why now?
right.
Why
Why now?
2025?
Right, this is
So
it.
so you're doing a great job preserving Italian dances, through your company, Allegro. Could you just talk to us a little bit about Allegro, your company?
Yeah, like I said, it started out as a college thesis project. It was not something that I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna start this dance company. We're gonna tour the world." That just sort of happened organically, I think, like your project
Right.
did as well. So now that we've been throughout the United States, we've danced in Italy, now we're teaching that next generation, "Hey, it's time to step up and learn these dances." We love performing, don't get me wrong. We love performing everywhere at these festivals. But I'm starting to see that it's time to shift the focus and the mission to preservation because those first few generations are now gone. And it's up to our generation to go, hey, hey, we need to know these authentic recipes and food. And after we eat, let's celebrate and sing and dance
Let's dance it
and
off.
dance it off. Why not? It's good
Of
for the
course.
mind, body, and spirit. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mens sana in corpore sano.
Yep.
Healthy mind, healthy
Exactly.
body. And I mean, there's just so many traditional things and elements that we have to preserve. And I think you hit the nail on the head, passing it down to the next generations because we tend to forget that. So why, in your opinion, is it important to pass these traditions down, whether it's food, whether it's dance, whether it's other things as well? Because there are many different aspects of
Sure.
Italy's cultural identity that have to be preserved, in my opinion.
Sure. And I mean, and I talk about that in my second book. Like you always see, like, let's say jewelry makers, they pass on how to make specific things from generation to generation. Even gondoliers, in Venice, they pass it on from generation to generation. So it just depends on who you are, but if you have a trait in your family that you wanna preserve, now's the time. Talk about it, share it, show them exactly how to do that great recipe or how to do these dance steps because that is how you can remember the past and be a part of it in the present day.
Of
Because when
course.
you're dancing, and as you know, when you're cooking, you have to be present.
Yeah.
You have to really be mindful of what you're doing in front of you. And dance and cooking both have that element, to stay present. And I think that's the life lesson that we learn with these dances as well.
Right, and I think there's that slow element too.
Yes.
The element of, like, taking a step back and letting things happen slowly until it arrives to the point of
Yeah.
excellence, if you will.
Yeah. And the dances are like that too. They might be fast tempo, but that doesn't mean that they don't give you a chance to rise and shine in the center, show off your moves, and then you learn, "Oh, it's not always about me. I'm gonna step back, and it's about somebody else in the community stepping forward and celebrating them." So I think that's the other life lesson that I always highlight when we have circle dances, like, you have to take turns and share. And just like with food, you might have that big bowl in the center, right? And we all are sharing from it. And so the dances are the same way. You have that filling up your cup, and then you're sharing and letting it spill out into your community. And that's what's so beautiful about the culture, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a culture of sharing, it's a culture of relationships,
Yeah,
and I think that's what
totally.
draws so many people, even so many Americans of non-Italian descent, to Italy and wanting to experience different aspects of the Italian culture.
Right, even my company, you don't have to be Italian to enjoy
Right?
Allegro. I've had lots of dancers over the years, almost 400 dancers now throughout the 32 years I've had the company, and, many of them weren't Italian, but gosh, they loved it, or it was a stepping stone for them to go, "Gosh, I wonder what my heritage is. I'm gonna go home and talk about that with my family." You have all of this music and dance and food and stories. I'm gonna go home and find out who I am. So, I think it's something that they can dig into and it makes them think about it.
Right, right. So if we kind of zoom out a little bit from Italy, we started in, the regional dancing or regional cuisine, if you will, if we're trying to stay parallel. Then we got more, we started going north. If we zoom out a little bit, then we see all of Europe. So what is your knowledge of traditional dancing outside of Italy, and how does it change, I guess, the farther north we go?
Yeah, I mean, you have, waltzes, like you said, in France or in Switzerland. There's a beautiful hand clapping, folk dance that's in Germany. I've studied a little bit of flamenco dance that also use castanets, but they're different shape. They're a lot larger, a lot more footwork that's smaller and tighter. But all of the cultural dances, no matter where you go and around the world, is about community. It's about connection. It's about sharing your story of what you do for a living, maybe what they believe in, and maybe how they show love. Those are all the things that the folk dances, no matter where you go around the world. And the more I study about other cultures, you find out, oh, we're all alike. We
Right,
all do the
exactly.
same things.
I
Yeah.
think there are more similarities than differences because I mean, if we do the same exercise for food, we zoom out and we look at pizza, for example. Okay, it's a beloved Italian food known around the world, but if we zoom out, pizza is similar to that of pita. It comes from the same origin,
Mhm.
so we have
Mhm.
more similarities than we do differences if we just keep
Correct.
peeling back the layers of an onion. I wanted to talk a second about your new book, your brand new book over here, which I am honored to have been sent. I think it's a great thing that you did, and I do have my review on the back. So thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you.
asking me
I
for
know,
to
I
do
was
that.
so excited for it, and, that kind of came about from my first book tour, actually. People were asking me, yeah.
Alessia discovers a spider web. This is great. Could you take a second just to explain more or less, how it was born and what it's about? And I know there's some Italian in there, so if you're trying to practice and learn some Italian words, it's a great way to talk about culture and dance at the same time.
Yeah, I get so many questions of, "Well, Anna, this is great. You have your company for adults or, younger college age students, but what about the piccolini? What
Right.
about the children that are not teens yet, but they wanna do something and get them interested in the culture?" I know when I was about maybe 6 or 7, I started with food. That besides hearing, my grandparents speak Italian and learning some language, but it was about food. How can I make pasta by myself now? How can I stir? How can I help, make Easter bread and fold and learn how to braid bread? So I thought, well, maybe they kept asking me, can you write something for little ones? I said, okay. So I started with Alessia. Alessio was my grandparents' last name. And so I made it a girl's name, Alessia, and she plays in her garden. She loves dancing in her garden in the story, and she comes across a unique person or insect, and his name is Signor Ragno, a spider. And she learns so much from Signor Ragno. He represents culture in the story. And so he teaches her about how he makes his web, and that web turns into a dance, which is called the tarantella. So she learns a little bit from Signor Ragno, and in turn, he helps her with her garden, keeping those other pesky pets away and keeping all of her food safe and secure. And so in the back, you have a little glossary of Italian words, and I use a few Italian words in the book to kind of give you a taste of Italy and the dance and what it would be like maybe to live there. And then also activities to do with your loved ones, how to do the tarantella, and then can you draw a spider or a spider web? What does that mean for you?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's great to start at a young age, and you said that you started with food and just being around people and feeling like you were part of something.
Yeah.
And I
Part of the
think
bigger picture.
part of the bigger picture, and that is a great seed to plant in the piccolini, as you say, to have them grow up and be proud of who they are and what they represent. So that's a great thing you're doing. Again, it's called Alessia Discovers a Spider Web, and where could you purchase it? Where if people were
You
interested?
can get it on my website, annaharsh.com, or Amazon. Of course, you can get all my books there. And even if it's something simple that you can do with your family is planting a seed and watching it grow, start your own garden today. You know what I mean? And it could be just from one seed. Maybe you're going to plant just a tomato seed or something simple or herbs, to use in your pasta or your salad.
I think
So,
we have to go back to the more simple times. Don't you
yeah.
think? Don't you think we need to just go back and start to appreciate the simpler things and the human aspect and the relationships that we do currently have, and we have to value them and kind of bring that mentality back, because that's really what it's all about, you know?
Yeah, I learned so much from my grandparents, how to sew, how to garden, how to just be, and you're right, it was very simple, and less is always more,
It is.
and I've learned that through choreography, I've learned that through these folk dances for sure, that less is more. Some of these dances in the North only have 3 steps.
Wow.
That's it.
So
Yeah,
maybe that's the key, one of the key similarities between food and dance.
yeah,
Less is more. We don't want a
right.
thousand ingredients in a recipe to make a carbonara, for example. You just need a handful, and that's it. Same thing with dances. Like, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
when you
we don't need to smother things on our plates, and we don't need it to be crowded either. Less is more. And that's making things simplistic is more enjoyable.
wow, and I think it's a great way to wrap up the show today. Less is more. Awesome, Anna. Thank you so much for sharing your insight about dance and just the human aspect behind it, which is very similar to that of Italian cuisine. Less is more. Ragazzi, you heard that. Thank you very much for your time. And by the way, how can everybody follow you, get in contact with you if they're interested in this topic?
Sure, they can go to annaharsh.com, or if you're interested in Allegro, you can go to allegrodancecompany.net.
Perfect. Awesome. And I'll put that information in the show notes as well. Thank you very much.
Grazie tanti.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through the stories of authentic Italian cuisine. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more insights and interviews. Also, feel free to reach out with your thoughts or questions on our social media channels at Stop Italian Sounding or on our website, stopitasounding.com. Grazie a tutti e alla prossima.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.